Our last speaker is Mr. Kenneth Braswell. He is the Executive Director of Fathers Incorporated, a nonprofit organization promoting responsible fatherhood and mentoring. Mr. Braswell is also the Director of the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, a widely recognized national and international resource for fathers, practitioners, and policymakers. He is from the USA.
So good to have more than one talent, right? Good afternoon. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Just want to make sure that we are all attentive to what's going on this afternoon in talking about family. I am honored to be in the country of Malaysia. This is one beautiful country. I've been all over the world. I think that I have met the kind of hospitality here that I have not. Let's put it this way. You guys treat me better than my own family treat me in my own house. My wife heard me say that, she would kill me. And so I want to thank the Global Peace Foundation for inviting me here. Diane Dawson, Alan, and my esteemed panel, Dr. Gandhi and Dr. Rai, thank you so much. I have about 15 minutes and I have my clock running, so I'm going to be in and out very quickly. And so, how is everybody feeling? All right, let me wake you up. Let me tell you a quick story before I get into my first slide. And so, there's this woman who lived on the top of a hill. And there was a mansion on the top of the hill. And in her house this particular weekend, she happened to be having a party. And all of you were at the party. And inside of this woman's house, she had a pool. And inside of the pool was not an ordinary pool. It wasn't a pool that we all swim in, that we like to swim. Inside of this pool was sharks and dangerous snakes and piranhas and all kinds of things that eat people were inside of her pool. And so the woman comes out and she stops the party and she says, I'll give anyone in the party $1 million if they swim from this end of the pool to the other end of the pool and back. And everybody said, this woman must be crazy. We're not jumping in this pool. So the party started again. She came back. She stopped the party. She said, I will give anybody $5 million if they jump in the pool on this side, swim to that side, and back. And everybody said, this woman is crazy. We're not jumping in this pool. Party continued. She comes back and she says, I will give anyone in the room $50 million if they jump into the pool from one side, swim to the other, and come back. And everybody said, nah, this woman is crazy. When she turned around, there was a big splash. And everybody turned and they looked in the pool, and this guy was in the pool and he was swimming. And he was swimming for his life. And he got to the other end of the pool, and he turned around and he came and he got back to the other end of the pool and he climbed out of the pool. And everybody was cheering him, and the woman said, you've won the $50 million. I didn't think anybody could do it. And he said to her, woman, I don't want your $50 million. All I want is the person who pushed me in here. I knew that would get you. And so oftentimes when people ask me how did I get into the work that I do, that's how I got in. Someone pushed me in. And I find myself in this pool every day, swimming past man-eating sharks and piranhas and all kinds of other things, trying to push this notion of, am I pushing this right? Okay, I think that's the next one. Anyway, if it stops again, I'm not going to try to fix it. this gives me the opportunity to do what I do best, and that's talk. And so, oftentimes when people ask me how I get into this work, I say that, it wasn't anything I went to school for. It wasn't anything that I was trained for. It wasn't anything that someone told me to do. Somehow God guided my path in this way that I ended up in this space where I became very concerned about men, and particularly about fathers. And about 10 years ago, I began this company called Fathers Incorporated. And I did it at a time that I was going through my own personal issues with the mother of my child at the time. And I felt like I wanted to do something for men. There was something wrong with the system that they were going through, and I wanted to do something to help the men that I saw be better fathers, better partners, better community-minded people. And so I've heard in our conference several times this notion that I am. And so I want you to know that I am a man, right? But I am also a father. I am also a husband. I'm also a son. I'm also a grandfather. I'm also an uncle. I'm a mentor. I'm loving. I'm compassionate. I am. And in the midst of all of those things, I love women. I love my mother. I love my wife. I love my sisters. I love my auntie. I love you. And this whole notion of family, talking about family, cannot continue to move on if we don't talk equally about the contributions of both men and women to the nourishment and upbringing of our children. How many of you agree with that? Come on, I need some claps. I need something going on, right? And so this would be so much better if it was actually working. You would see some really cool stuff I did. But anyway, so when we're having this conversation about family, oftentimes we talk about the dynamics of family, we talk about the research, we talk about everything that's taking place, and we define what family looks like in our countries and in our community. But we fail to do one thing when we do that. We don't have this very critical conversation, and that is, what is family? Good. What is family? What are we talking about? Are we talking about mothers and children? Are we talking about uncles and aunts? Are we talking about a village of people who care for children? Are we talking about whatever we want to talk about? But who are we talking about when we talk about families? So let me tell you what happens in the U.S. when we talk about families, since that's where I was born and raised, and that's the paradigm that I know, and I'm sure that it happens in many other countries, at least as I've heard what has taken place so far at this conference. It has shown itself to be true for me. The many times that I've heard us talk about family, particularly in the U.S., when we define family, oftentimes we define family as women and children. Is that correct in many countries? When you hear folks talk about family? And it's very difficult to talk about the nurturing of families if you only concern yourself with mothers and children, because I submit to you this: at some point in that relationship, a man was there. He may not be there now, but at some point he was there, and he had a critical job in creating that child. And so when we talk about family, we have to talk about family with the inclusion of both mothers and fathers if we expect to have awesome children. And so this is a formula that often works for me when I see it play itself out in our communities, and that is that nurturing mothers plus providing fathers equal healthy parenting. If you times healthy parenting by love, the result is some awesome children. Right? Yes? No? Yes? But look at that little thing right beneath children. What does it say? Most of the time. Sometimes you could do everything you could possibly do for your kids, and how many of you have had that kind of kid? You've raised them, you've loved them, you've done everything you possibly can do to them, but somehow they didn't turn out to be awesome. At least your definition of awesome. Maybe their definition of awesome, but not yours. Let's go to the next one. And so when we have these conversations internationally about families, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we've seen around the world, we've begun to start stripping apart having conversations relative to both fathers and mothers. And I was going to do the flip chart, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to have you respond to me. Tell me something great about mothers. Anything, anybody. Unconditional. Superwoman. Loving, caring. Come on, give me some more. Multitaskers, give me some more. They know everything. Give me some more. Mothers, give me some more. No more? It got to be some more. They're always right. They're always right. Those are great things about moms, right? Right. All right, so tell me some great things about fathers. Say that again? Did you hear? Well, hold on a minute. Wait. Just hold on, because I got to address this answer. She said money. And that's okay when he has some money. It's not okay when he don't have any money. But that is a great thing about dads. What else is great about dads? Provider. Challenging. Advisor, security. What else? Advice, and I heard something else. Okay. My point is, we can find something good about both mothers and fathers. So if I can gather you in this room, an international group of people from all over the world with all kinds of diverse backgrounds, mothers and fathers yourselves, uncles and aunts yourself, sons and daughters yourself, how come when we talk about family, we cannot include the notion that fathers are critical in the lives of our children? When y'all go home, y'all going to think about that, right? And so this work that we do, next screen, this work that we do with fathers is a very sensitive work, right? And it's sensitive because when I talk about fathers, I have to do some prerequisite talking so that everybody is clear on what we do, right? And so let me make a couple of statements so that those of you who are in the room saying this guy's up there talking about men, we didn't come here to talk about men, we came to talk about women and children. I'm going to change your paradigm in this workshop, okay? Pro-fatherhood does not mean anti-motherhood. The notion that I want to build the capacity of fathers to be better parents doesn't mean I want to take anything away from the loving, nurturing responsibility of mothers. But what I want you to understand is that if I can build them both equally and have mutual respect for each other and mutual love for each other and be able to build on their families and build on their lives to which they have the goal of ensuring that they have awesome children, then I have to work with both of them at the same time. Does that make sense? And so the work that we do around the world is just that. Looking at what does responsible fatherhood and healthy manhood look like around the world. Next slide. Before you do the next slide. Mandela, rest in peace, said this. This was something that I found this morning, and it was so appropriate for this conversation. He said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his language, it goes to his heart. And this is why this is important. Because for most men, it's very difficult to get to our hearts, but it's very easy to get to our heads. And you have to do less work in order to influence what we think than you have to do in influencing how we feel. Does that make sense? I can change what you do if I can change how you think. Does that make sense? I can change what you do if I can change how you think, which means if I can educate you, I can change the things that you can do. But if I don't change how you feel, you think differently about the things you've been educated about. Thus, you behave differently. The reason you have to talk to a man's heart is because you want to begin to change him at the root, to then begin to think differently so that he does differently. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Did I lose anybody? Do I need to back up and go over that again? Right? I can change what you do if I can change how you think. I can change how you think if I can change how you feel. Right? Love is an emotional feeling. It's not something you think about. It's something you feel. So if I can get you to understand this notion of love and peace, which is a feeling, I can get you to change how you think about each other. And if I begin to change how you think about each other, I can then get you to change what you do to each other. Does that make sense? And I'm way off my script now, but I felt like I had to go down that road with you so you understand clearly why it's important for us to begin to include fathers in this conversation of family. Next slide. And so in America, our numbers look like many countries around the world with respect to our children. There's a leaflet that's going around, and I saw the leaflet, and I'm not sure whose leaflet it is, but there's a stat on the leaflet that says 41% of all children are born into single-family households in America. That means our children in America, for the most part, are being born into uncommitted households. So when Dr. Gandhi and Dr. Rai talks about marriage, when you are not married, it means you are uncommitted. Does that make sense? And so when you have a country who is uncommitted to each other as couples, they also become very uncommitted to the children that they bear. And so out of wedlock households for us in America is critically important, and so much more important in the African American communities because 73% of our babies are born into single family households. 53% of Latino families in America are born into out of wedlock households. 35% of Caucasian white babies are born into out of wedlock households. 41% across the board. And that number is important to us because what research and statistics say is that those children will probably, after 5 years of age, spend little to no time at all the rest of their lives with their fathers. Something happens when we don't make a commitment to each other in the beginning before we have children. Fathers versus fatherhood. You notice that when I talk about fathers, that I use the term fatherhood, there's a difference between fathers and fatherhood. Our president says all the time, any fool could be a father. But it takes a man to take care of a child and engage in fatherhood. Fatherhood means the act of being a father. You don't engage in fatherhood if you're not acting like a fatherhood. So when I say responsible fatherhood, I'm talking about the man who engages in fatherhood in a responsible manner. Is that I'm building up? Oh, you guys still with me? Because I only have 5 minutes to go. And so fatherlessness and father absence for us is critically important. Direct services. If we're going to build the capacity of men around the globe, we have to look at services that work just as well for men as they do for women. Fathers need services as well. Cradle to the grave prison, that's something that you hear a lot in America. I haven't heard that internationally, but what it really means is there are children, at-risk children in our community that literally are on a path from the cradle to the grave. They're poor. All kinds of indicators are in their lives that indicate to us that that's the path they're going to take. Let's go to the next slide. And these are some of the societal barriers that our fathers are dealing with. Much like Dr. Gandhi had in her slide, where she talked about some of the issues that we deal with as a family, where individually fathers deal with somewhat the same kinds of issues. The biggest one in our country tends to be employment. And one of the words that you use with respect to what makes a father great is providing. It's very hard to provide without provision. If you can provide some things, but for the most part in this world, money means something. Being able to work means something. Having a craft means something. Having a skill means something. That gives a man the ability to provide. The human nature of men is to provide and protect. That is our human nature. Human nature of women is to nurture and love. Now, neither of those mean that women can't protect and provide and men can't nurture and love. The human nature is for us to do one, but our human ability allows us to do both. Does that make sense? Are y'all learning something here? I'm just like speaking to the back of the wall. Y'all getting this? All right? And so many of these issues in our country are issues that our fathers are dealing with, and we're trying to look for social paradigms and social work that allows us to be able to deal with the things that serve as barriers for fathers to be the kind of men that they need to be in the lives of their families and in the lives of their children. Child support is a system in our country that makes our fathers financially responsible for their children. That is tied up in the legal system. Education is a huge issue in our country, as it is around the world. Men with incarcerated backgrounds, relationship building, parenting, substance abuse, housing, conflict resolution, and the list goes on and on and on. But what we're talking about is men in our country with a complexity of issues. It's not just single fold. And so many times when they don't have a job, they don't just not have a job. They got some other stuff going on with them too. And if you don't have the services to help them with the other things, it's very difficult to get them a job. Does that make sense? Next slide. Next slide. So around the world, we have been, and we have seen some very interesting things with respect to fatherhood around the world. Next slide. Oh, let's go back a minute. I have to show everybody my lovely son. The little boy on the right-hand side, that's my namesake, Kenneth Jr. He was, I think, 2 years old now. He is now 5, going on 50. So he's a challenge. And that's my nephew on the left-hand side. Next slide. And so part of my work began in an NGO called the W. Haywood Burns Educational Center, where we did work in South America, particularly Panama and Costa Rica, working very closely with the Panama Canal Authority and the Southern Caucus of the United Nations, really looking at community restoration. And so a lot of times when you hear people talk about environment, they're talking about air, land, and water. And what we did is we expanded the definition of environment, because environment is more than land, air, and water. It's family, it's work, it's health. As Dr. Gandhi had in one of her slides, the environment is much more broader and complex than just air, land, and water. And so that was one of the strategies that we used in Panama to begin to strengthen families. Next slide. These are just pictures of some of the work that we did in Panama. As you can see, one of our main focuses was to really look and to see how fathers interacted with the children and their families in communities. And oftentimes what we saw is that, you know, mothers and fathers who have disagreements have very strong disagreements, not because they hate their children. They have strong disagreements because they intensely love their children. And I think if we begin to start playing on the fact that they're fighting because they love, then they might hate each other. Right? That's a whole nother workshop. You do that later. Right? But they both love their children. And somehow we have to find a way to begin to start capitalizing on the love that they have for their children. Next slide. And then we're going to wrap it. We're going to roll through these. We did some work in Nigeria in 2011. They partnered with us in a campaign called the Year of Responsible Men, where internationally we really tried to use the entire year of 2011 to promote responsible men. Next slide. One of the things that they did for our organization was had one of the schools, they had a father bring your child to school day in Nigeria. And on the day that the fathers came to school, they dressed all their children in blue, which happened to be the color of our campaign. And so I was very touched by that. Next slide. About a month ago, we were in Ghana doing community restoration work in Ghana. It's a literacy empowerment organization, but my work over there was parental engagement and community engagement. How do we get parents and community involved in the education of their children? Oftentimes in Ghana, what we saw with respect to their fathers was men had to move from the village to another village in order to work. And when they moved to another village, oftentimes when they moved to the other village, as sometimes often we do as men when we leave our family and go to another village, what do? Start another family. And then they leave that village and they go to another village and then they start another family. And by the time they're 4 families down the line, they've forgotten about the one that they started back here. And so all of those things could be rectified, but we found that not only in Ghana, but we also found that in Mongolia when we was there 2 years ago. Next slide. Like I just said, I was in Mongolia. We worked with the University of Mongolia to really look at how to create a system to provide services for families. Interestingly enough, about Mongolia, anyone here from Mongolia? No one? Last year we had a few people from Mongolia. Interesting thing about Mongolia is they don't have a state or national service system that provides support for men and women. They rely solely on NGOs to provide that kind of services for the folks in Mongolia, and we were there to help them establish that system. Next slide. Those are pictures of us in Mongolia. People still don't believe that I held the eagle in my hand. Can you see me holding the eagle in my hand? I don't believe I did that. And so, next slide. And so we're going to be creating what we're calling the International Fatherhood Alliance. And the alliance is going to look at partnering with companies across the globe and helping us to assess the impact of fatherlessness, to understand manhood, to understand family dynamics, to create a repository of global fatherhood research and resources to begin to start feeding the rest of the world with respect to manhood, provide capacity buildings for organizations who are looking to engage in initiatives to help promote and educate the imagery of responsible fathers, and to create tools for international fatherhood programs. The one thing that's not on here is next year we're going to roll out an international campaign that I hope that all of you will want to be engaged in, and this is the first time that I'm talking about this publicly. I've been writing about it for 3 or 4 months, and now I'm ready to kind of talk about it. But the campaign is called Men Plus. Men Plus. And the notion of Men Plus is we are men plus fathers, plus uncles, plus cousins, plus sons, plus nurturers, plus providers, plus. We're not just men. We are more. And all of those pluses aren't positive. Some of those men are, no, we won't go. You know where I'm going with that one, right? There's some minuses to the plus, and we have to figure out how to deal with the minuses and the plus. The next one. We are also the manager of the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse in the U.S. That is under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. As the contractor for the clearinghouse, we also provide technical assistance, and we oversee President Obama's fatherhood and mentoring initiatives, so we're proud of that. Next slide. Here are some resources. If anyone wants this slideshow, this presentation, take my card and reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to email you this PowerPoint. Next slide. And so here's some of my other information, my time. I'm about 5 minutes over, and I'm sorry about that. But I will say, I want to end with this. This whole notion that one family under God. I really believe that there's an opportunity for us to do greater family strengthening work in faith-based institutions around the world. And here's why. I'm a Christian myself, and I talk to my church all the time about family strengthening, about responsible fatherhood. They get it, and so they understand it. But because I'm there, because I'm always hammering it in their head, so they get it. I'm trying to create disciples out of them so that they can go out and do this work, and I don't have to go everywhere. But here's where I started with them. How can you come to church each Sunday and profess to understand a relationship with the Father, but not understand a relationship with a father? Some of y'all are going to get that later when y'all leave, right? But when you're talking about this family strengthening work and the whole basis and foundation of what we believe in, what we believe in oftentimes is grounded in the notion of family. Mothers, fathers, children, cows, sheep, dogs, cats, birds, and everything else that's part of the family paradigm is a part of that. And I think that if we can find a way to begin to start there, we can start a lot of places. We can start in school, we can start in hospitals, we can start at conferences like this, we can start in a lot of different places. But if we can start there, in addition to beginning to engage men around the country in raising their voices in support of women's issues. Because oftentimes around the globe, and even in the U.S., when we talk about things like domestic violence, human trafficking, and the other issues that direct oppression and the other issues that directly impact our women, oftentimes we don't talk to the very entity that is mostly responsible for it in the first place, and that's men. And that's not an indictment on men. What it is an accountability mechanism that says that for those of us in this room, for all the men in this room, please stand up. Please stand up. All of you. All of the men stand up. So ladies, look around, look at these men in the room. Look at these men in the room. The men in this room do not match the societal profile of men that we promote across the globe. These are men here at this conference who understand the critical importance of peace, the critical importance of family, the critical importance of commitment, and the critical importance of God. We are one family under God, not just the men who are standing up, but the women who are sitting down. And the reason that I had you stand up is because we need to begin to show our women that we have the ability to stand up. Thank you.